everyone. So I'm just pressing the record right now. So Nyawaskeno, I'm Kriki Kazak. I work with Cornell ILR Buffalo CoLab and Partnership for the Public Good on what is called Buffalo Commons. And it's really a joint collaboration between this community-based think tank, which Andrea will share a little bit more about, and Cornell ILR. We do a few different things. Number one is curate the digital library. So PPG and a lot of our partners produce a lot of different research on communities, organizations, topics, issues, challenges, opportunities, case studies within Buffalo. And we try to house them in this digital library so that they're available to any individual or organization who might need that. So it's really just information or knowledge that can be used by community members. Another thing is we have a High Road Fellowship. So there's undergraduates who join us for 8 weeks over the summer, and they are able to work with our community partners. We're opening up the application. So if you or your organization are interested in hosting a High Road Fellow, you are welcome to apply for that. The final thing is we really try to bridge the connections between higher ed. You know, we have 21 institutions of higher ed here in Buffalo and our community partners. And so if you or your organization has research needs or questions that come up, or data or information that you need, definitely reach out to us. And if we aren't able to find that information for you, oftentimes we can connect you with someone who is able to do that. So one of the things you might hear today is, you know, data and information is really helpful as you are drafting your conversations in collaboration with the media. And so that's one of the opportunities that we have to work with you. Otherwise, I look forward to chatting with you all, and I'll pass it off to Andrea.
Thank you so much. I'm Andrea O'Sullivan. I'm director here at Partnership for the Public Good. I joined PPG in 2017. As Kriki said, we are a community-based think tank, just for anyone who's not, there are familiar faces, but for anyone who's not familiar with us, and a network organization now made up of over 300 community groups, partners, agencies from across Buffalo, Niagara. And we support those groups throughout the year with action research, civic engagement, and policy development. And we started offering more publicly and for broader sets of our partners these workshops and trainings before COVID, which we run on civic skills like writing for the media, and then on issue-based areas as they come up: affordable housing, community safety, different policy reform topics that our partners are working on. So it's great to have you all with us. I think since we have a relatively small in-person group, we will pass the mic around for introductions, and just maybe tell us your name. If you are here, gender pronouns, I use she and her. If you are here representing an organization as part of your work. And then I think very, very briefly, tell us if you have submitted and had published a letter to the editor or an op-ed piece, and very, very briefly, in just a few words, tell us what topic it was on. And strangely, since we planned this weeks ago, I have a piece co-authored in the Buffalo News today in another voice about the Bills Stadium deal and working toward community reinvestment in it. Oh, geez. And we're going to skip you two and introduce you after and jump over to Tanvier. Sorry, I always do this to you. I feel like I always do this to you. There you are.
Hello, my name is Tanvier. Peer pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Policy Advancement here at the Partnership for the Public Good. I have had a few pieces in the Buffalo News. Some that come to mind are with Clean Slate, which is legislation that passed the Senate, not the Assembly, at the state level, that would grant automatic record sealing to persons who have been released from prison once they pass certain thresholds, and they have to qualify. And then good cause legislation, which is a basic tenant protection that we're trying to pass at the state level, and then also locally through the Buffalo Tenant Bill of Rights.
I'm Ben Rosick. I just started as a communication coordinator at Preservation Buffalo Niagara. He, him, and I haven't read anything past social media yet, so I'm excited to learn.
My name is Rachel Bierman. I work for the Buffalo Jewish Federation in the Jewish Community Relations Council. I'm working on my letters and what they stand for. And she, her, and I personally published things like or sent in letters to the editor, but nothing professionally.
Hi, I'm Mark Muskowski. I go by he, him, and I am the Immigration Pro Bono Coordinator at Volunteer Lawyers Project. I do not have anything published ever. So.
I'm Judy Lopez Del Moral. I'm here representing the Buffalo Lille sister city. We do adult exchanges with Lille, France, and I'm a retired public librarian. In that capacity, I published a lot of things, mostly on literacy. I was head of the Lifelong Learning Center at the public library, which no longer exists, but I'm a long time retired too. I have to learn new tricks.
Hi, everyone. Samantha Nephew. I am a healthcare advocate with the Healthcare Education Project, which is a part of the Healthcare Workers Labor Union 1199 SEIU. I go by she, hers, and I have not ever had anything published, but as a organizer for many years now, I've recruited a lot of people to do so, but I'm very interested in learning how to do it myself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rose. I'm an intern. She, they is my pronouns, and I am an intern for the Partnership for Public Good. I work on projects such as policing, youth diversion, and vacant lots, and I never published anything before.
I'm Stephen Hogsma. I'm with Housing Opportunities Made Equal, he, him. I had one letter to the editor published that I co-authored with our executive director, Deanna Eason.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Fendia. I am a clinical psychologist in private practice, but I'm also a member of the Climate Psychology Alliance, which is in the US and the UK. And I am the co-chair of the Western New York chapter of Climate Reality Project, and I have not had anything published yet.
Irony of ironies. My name is Jack Joyce. I have three irons in the fire. The first is Citizens Against Wind Turbines in Lake Erie. The second is Buffalo, Heart of the Supershore, a transnational labeling of our area. And the third is International Heart, under which flag I'm pushing a remarkable life-saving technology. I'm particularly interested today, though, in something I saw online when I was looking up editorial boards. And this came from the UK, the Science and Engineering Council. They named something cognitive cronyism, a worthy work overlooked where there is no scientific consensus. And I'm wondering if the news might be guilty of cognitive cronyism by being not open to other points of view that are not strictly in line with their liberal cast.
Thank you, Jack. Steve Thorne here. I'm president of the Jung Center Buffalo, otherwise known as the Analytical Psychology Society of Western New York. And we've been published in the paper a few years ago, a couple times or so, but nothing recently. So, we're very anxious to learn about how to do that and to get busy with it.
Hello, my name is Nijay Davis. I work for the Majority Leader, Crystal People-Stokes, as her Director of Community Affairs. And I have not written anything to be published. However, I have written some press releases on her behalf.
Thank you so much. All really interesting to know that. And we'll ask folks who are on Zoom to put in the chat your introductions so we have that as well. And also encouraging our Zoom participants to turn your cameras on so we can look at you, unmute, and ask questions when the time comes as well. So we're so delighted today to have with us Dawn Bracely and Elizabeth Licata, who are both on the editorial board and editorial board writers for the Buffalo News. Dawn, I believe you've been in that role for about 22 years, which is amazing. So a ton of experience. And Elizabeth, you were the longtime editor of Buffalo Spree magazine, which I'm sure many folks have read. And just how many months ago joined the editorial board?
In April, I was editor of Spree for 23 years.
23 years, amazing. And then on the editorial board this year. So we've got long time and new members of the editorial board with us, but so much editing and writing and publishing experience to share. So today in this workshop, I'm going to do a really brief rundown of PPG's tips that we've shared with partners on writing for the media. We will have a lot of discussion and conversation with Dawn and Elizabeth to add their tips into the mix, their insider knowledge of how to get your advocacy letters published. We will then review how can you engage the editorial board to pitch the paper on the official position that the paper takes as well. And we'll have time to look at a couple sample letters and walk through all this together. So let's dive in. Oh, thanks, Craigie. No problem. So our tips for writing letters to the editor. We like to start, as is the case, I think, in all good writing, to really set your goals before writing, to know what are you trying to accomplish, who is the audience. Sometimes in a letter to the editor, you might be trying to convince folks that have been opposed to your position. Sometimes you're just trying to rally your supporters who are already with you to take a particular action. And then what is the action you want readers to take? What impact will this story have on them? We also advise partners to make it newsworthy. Editors, we think, really like topics that are already in the news. So your letter can respond to articles even that were published in the last 2 days. Maybe you know your issue area of housing, preservation. You could have some letters ready on the advocacy issues you're working on this year, and then be monitoring the news. And when something comes out related to that, you can kind of tweak your letter to be tying into that news hook and send it in. You can refer even directly to a news article or an editorial position that the paper has taken and agree or disagree with it, and then tie it to current events in different ways. So I'd love to, we're just going to keep this real conversational. Turn to Dawn and Elizabeth to hear any other thoughts on how advocates can make their letters newsworthy or kind of relevant to the moment. And we're going to pass this mic back and forth, which is what it is for our Zoom listeners.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start off. I was here about 3 years ago with Greg Connors, who since retired. And as mentioned, Elizabeth's joined us and been fantastic, hitting the ground, and just I've learned a lot myself, quite frankly. So a few years ago, and I guess this is new for me too, the hybrid, we're in a new world. Those tips were perfect as far as letters to editor. I would also emphasize maybe pegging it to a news event. I think I just recently saw a letter from an advocacy group that talked about, or maybe not a group, but a person, specifically mentioned an article that ran in our paper in the last day or two. And I took particular note of that and thought, okay, this will be okay, because this person I have seen published online in other publications. And that made me hesitant, because I have had, especially lately, a lot of, whether it's climate, whether it's a particular issue on a broader basis, and I've, fact checked this and that. And then I find the very same letter and say the Lockport Sun, word for word. We can't, once it's published like that, we can't republish it in the Buffalo News. And so that's another, it's, it's one of our rules, like if you want to publish it in the Amherst Bee, some people think so, but then they go online on Facebook and social media, and they express themselves, in addition to our, online comments. And then they get upset because once it's published word for word in another publication, and then we won't publish. Now, if you want to publish it in our publication first and then publish it in those others, fine, Well,
we retain discretion over what we publish and how we edit it.
Yeah.
We don't automatically print everything that's sent to us without any kind of discretion or looking at it or editing. There might be things that are said that are not true. Right. We don't really want to spread things that we know we fact check and find that are in fact not the case. We're not really doing our readers a service if we do that.
And I want to speak to, the assumed bias that we have. I actually have a letter that I taped to my work area from a very conservative letter that I ran, and it was very short, and a lot of people got angry about it. The gentleman who wrote the letter actually, and he hand wrote it, snail mailed it in. He wrote another letter strictly thanking us for running it. He said, I didn't think you were going to run it. I love conservative letters. I love them. You know why? Because we get so many letters that are not conservative. And it's not our, we're agnostic when it comes to that, letters or other things from the public. It's your opinion. It's not us saying we don't get a lot. Believe it or not, we don't get a lot of conservative.
My comment from me personally wasn't about letters to the editor. It was about editorial statements from the editorial board.
Oh, you mean the actual editorials?
And we're going to talk about the editorial board later. So
Okay.
I'm gonna stick to our order
Okay.
a little bit here.
And so the last time I was here 3 years ago, I probably talked about the 300 word limit. We've been liberal on that lately because and we have had letters that are longer because 3 years ago is a lifetime in the world of tech. Look at us now. We're on, line, and we're in person and remote. All that wasn't happening 3 years ago. So if the letter is, say, around 350, and it's got a lot of quality of content, I'm going to say, okay, we'll make it work. We'll put that in there. People are more drawn. I think you mentioned social media, and there's a lot of that going on because people know they can go on there on social media without being edited, without being, they can start, griping, I guess.
Well, if you run into a publication that has editors, I think you can expect to be edited.
Right, that's true.
That's what we're there for. Otherwise, why have us?
And any other thoughts, Elizabeth, on kind of making it newsworthy?
Well, I think it's is this even on? Because it doesn't seem.
It's
so.
not
Is
on
it?
for the room. It's just linking us to.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, I think when you write in regarding issues that have been aired in the newspaper, it's probably kind of a good idea to just talk about the issue and not spend a lot of your time disagreeing with the actual article and talking about the person who wrote it and saying why they're wrong. That has to go through a whole other fact-checking layer, and it'll make it's a slower process. So if you have feelings on an issue, rather than waste your time arguing with someone else, make your case yourself in your own words. That's the advice that I would give. And I think those letters work better. Certainly a brief mention is all right, but then, we want to hear what you think in your words. And then in terms of letters to the editor, as I just started in April, Dawn really does most of the work with the letters to the editor. I'll just reiterate that we welcome them from all viewpoints, certainly, and we'd rather have viewpoints that disagree, because then we know that other people will write in and take the other side, and that's the kind of dialogue, that's the kind of dynamic that you really want to keep going. So I don't really have much.
Thank you. So in our tips rundown, I think, Dawn, it's interesting to hear that because we always advise partners, keep it short, follow the paper's guidelines. Of course, we're with Buffalo News editors today, but you can submit to the Challenger. We heard the Lockport Sun. I think, there's town and village papers all around the region. So to be checking those guidelines. For letters to the editor, we've got the news limit at 250, but it sounds like it's 300, and maybe there's a blurring line there now too.
So there's a clarification on that, and that was the case 3 years ago.
Okay.
For some reason, and I don't know why, we changed those limits years ago, way before I even started doing letters at all. I would just fill in to 300 words. But if you look at the weekday paper, it'll say 250. If you look at Sunday, it'll say 300. It's just, it hasn't been 250 at least for 10 years. And I apologize for that because I don't know why that's still there.
I noticed in our own PPG materials, we had 250 some places and 300 some places. So we'll update that. So 300 words. And, we have often advised partners, if you go longer, the papers are less likely to run it. Maybe now there's a bit more wiggle room. 350. Okay. And with that, we like to make the point that if you go way over their word limit, but they want to print it, they're going to edit it instead of you. And you know what your most important points are, what words you can lose or not. So it's better for you to be your own editor first before sending it in. After drafting, you can really go back through and remove every word that's not essential. I think always when we draft these, or the My View or another voice that we're going to talk about as well, you always end up over the word count at first. So really working back through like that word by word is great. And then go ahead and give your own piece an engaging short title. The Buffalo News does use titles on its letters, and so they might use yours if you include it, but they might not as well. I think Elizabeth started to mention some of this, but really get right to the point. Include the most important info in your first paragraph, if not the first sentence of your piece. And at PPG, we use a little formula with partners around advocacy pitches that might be useful for this too. There were a few of you here last week, and we shared this then as well, which is X should do Y because of Z. X is the actor you're looking to take a step. Y is what you want to see them do. And Z is the very good reasons to take that action. And so here's two examples. These could be openers, sentence, or at least paragraph. You get these points across in your letters. The transit authority should convert its fleet to electric buses in order to fight climate change and improve local air quality. So we have the actor, the action, and the reasons. Or I was thinking of mine today, knowing it was in, and saying the Pagulas should commit to community benefits because they are receiving a large public subsidy for the new stadium in a high poverty region. So again, we have the actor, the very specific step you want to see taken, and a couple of reasons for why. Again, stick to one point. It's too short to make all your arguments. You can't present all your arguments in 250, 350 to 600 words. You can maybe squeeze in letting people know where they can get more information. And then this, I think, was Elizabeth's point. Don't use your space restating your opponent's argument. First of all, you don't really have the space to do that. And also, it can have the unintended consequence of what if that point sticks with some of your readers and they resonate more with your opponent's argument than yours. You might as well stick to your own voice and your arguments in there. So turning back to Dawn and Elizabeth, talking about the content of these submissions, what do you as editors like to see? Data and arguments, personal stories and arguments. We're going to talk a bit more about Another Voice and My View, which I think Elizabeth takes the lead on editing now, and those are more geared toward personal stories. But overall, what do you like to see in the content of readers' arguments?
And yeah, so I'll reiterate the 350 max on the letters because my eyes glaze if I see it's 500, 600, words. There was something else I wanted to mention I didn't mention before. As far as data, I love data, but I even love hypertext links more because I do a lot of hypertext linking on the digital end. You may see that I put in little videos when I can. I talked to the digital editor and she showed me how to put in YouTube videos. So I've been going nuts, like on the, as an example, Aaron Judge's 60-second home run. And I found a video from, I think, MLB, put it on YouTube so we can grab that. It was just several seconds of that. But anyway, I digress. I love hypertext links that I can actually put into the digital version to support the argument of the letter. If the person writes the letter and provides those links, that makes it easier on me and I don't have to go hunting. Because one of the things that I do, and I actually do enjoy that as far as the fact checking, if someone makes a statement, I go looking for it. And I've called people and said, I looked for this online and I found the official CDC website and they're saying this, but you said that. And then the person might say, yeah, I thought I saw that on a website or a different website. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, I love hypertext links, or if you don't want to do the links, just tell me where it is, in the letter so I can make the link. That would be great. So that I think it makes for a healthier commenting sort of scrum.
But it sounds like maybe there's two places. Digital versus the paper.
I'm just going to state that question for Zoom. So for our Zoomers, the question is from Don's comments there, it sounds like there's two different versions of letters, digital versus print. And can you explain that? And I'm really curious too, because we always like hyperlink our PPG publication if it's a new report we're launching, but I did not know that we could kind of cite all kinds of sources through links and that would make it into the digital version. So tell us more.
Well, I've always been like this hyperlink obsessed person. Even in the old days, I remember coming into the office to make sure the link worked. Now we have better software. So yeah, on the paper version, you're getting that 2D sort of two-dimensional, one-dimensional, whatever you want to call it, experience, right? And so, but online, when you go there, there's more dynamic things, obviously. We all know that you can do, that better than most of us in the room, probably. And so I guess for my part, I know it takes a few more minutes or it takes so many more seconds if you add up seconds to minutes to hours. It's just, I just find it interesting. And I think that there's an audience out there that is digital, either all digital or mostly digital. And they might be looking at the letter. I think I've seen in one or two cases, people will say, well, did you click on, or did you look at the report or did you see? So if there's a report, I like to know what that hypertext link is. And then I can link it in the digital version. And so, yeah, the experience reading the actual paper into a larger topic is going to be different than, online.
Would you confidence individuals sending you a hyperlink only and saying this very much represents what I think? Would you be?
No, because it's not a letter. Yeah, that's not. And also, I also want to warn people against, copy. This has happened. Copying and pasting something that's been on social media and then sending it in as a letter to the editor. I've caught that in one or two cases.
Take a whole block of text that's not their own.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in one case, unfortunately, I didn't catch him before. I have caught other people, but in one case I didn't. And that was a very unpleasant, experience. Don't do that. So anyway, let me hand it over to you.
I really don't, in terms of the letters, I think that I've said all that I would say about the letters.
Right. Okay.
Great. One real technical things then when we talk about the style of what you're submitting, some of these tips I think came from what Greg Connors, your former My View and Another Voice editor, shared with us last time as well. If you want these to get picked for being printed, don't use bold, italics, or all caps. Newspapers don't use them, so that's going to add to their editing. Use short, simple, active sentences, short paragraphs. Emphasize the human interest angles, for your readers, what will make them care enough to act. We use so much data, but we also do try to have personal narratives, local stories. It's not just reporters that can get those, right? Many of us working in coalitions or organizations with residents affected by these real issues. You can include with their permission some of those stories. Avoid acronyms, technical language, abbreviations, jargon. We use so much of that in our social and policy work, but best to keep it out. And then, I'd be interested if this resonates, but if you're commenting on a state or national issue, be sure to bring it on home and emphasize the local aspect as well. Comments like that on styles, and this can be about My View and Another Voice as well. You're both such experienced editors. What are even kind of common writing mistakes you see that might make it less likely to select a letter or a column?
No, actually.
Oh, yeah. Do we have a question?
Well, yeah, I have two questions. Someone writes a letter to the editor, they will write a word. Right? And the other question. Some things, it was to me that would be natural.
Well, if we can't open up the PDF, we'll send you an email and say, we can't open it. Can you copy and paste onto the memo of the email?
Okay, the other question was this. Another question is, what's the full purpose of it? I mean, it gives people an opportunity to sound off, you know? I think there's value in that, but
So the question for Zoom is, what is the purpose, zooming out for Zoom, what is the purpose of having these columns in the first place?
That's a very good question. And you know what? There's a great example, I think. During the height of the pandemic, we got a letter to the editor from a clerk, town clerk, and who is an expert in this topic. So you have to remember, we're at the beginning of the pandemic. She wrote in a very specific letter on steps on getting married in a pandemic. And we were able to see the metrics around that time. And, you know, the people who plugged into that letter, you know, really, it zoomed because, you know, there was no vaccine out. Very beginning, we're talking 2020. And I remember putting the headline, something like how to get married in a pandemic. So that was really, I think that was a public service. You know, that's how I looked at it.
Add on the overall point at all.
Well, I think that it goes to interaction. You know, when you have a publication, a newspaper or magazine, you don't want to, you know, you want to make sure are people reading it. And it's a give and take. This is communication. Communication just doesn't happen like this. It's this, you know, you want both sides of the communication equation. It's that simple, you know.
And then certainly at PPG, for many of our partners, as folks that are working in community change and hoping to influence the decision-making of government officials, these columns are a critical tool to reach an audience, to reach folks that are not attending our events, not coming to our coalitions, that really we wouldn't be able to reach without this. Yes, we can reach certain folks on social media, but even that nowadays, I think, is very kind of restricted, as we say, right, to your own bubble of folks that you know and interact with. So to have this platform to reach a whole segment of the public is a hugely valuable tool for folks wanting to influence civic discussion and issues. We've had 2 questions from the Zoom, so I want to pause from our presentation to look at those. First, from Emmanuel, is a letter to the editor the only way the community can contribute to the paper? Other platforms they can submit to? So very technically, there's 3 types of submissions, and we're going to talk about the other 2 specifically too: a letter to the editor, another voice column, and in my view, but I'll let our speakers weigh in on that too, other platforms for folks to contribute to the paper.
Well, do you want to launch into that now? Yeah. Because that's a whole big thing. That's great. Because the another voice and the my view criteria are very different, really, from letter to the editor. My view is a personal essay. It's limited to 600 words. If people send in more than that, I'm fine with it. I don't really care. I can cut it down from 900 if I have to. I'd rather not, but I've been doing this for 23 years. It's what I do. I've been copy editing for that long. So if it's too short, that's a problem. I can't add to it. I can't get into that person's head. When it's only been about 20 words short or so, I have, and if it's a topic I know, I have added, but I'd rather not do that. So yeah, 600 words. It is a personal essay. I think you have like a sheet that Greg gave. Right. I do want, Greg said certain topics are over. Can I see that? Yeah, because I didn't hand this out. This is Greg. Right. Right. It's not the place, as he says, it's not for politics. It's not for the big issues of the day. It's really about something that you draw from your own life, something that you notice that gives you insight into human nature, maybe an insight that you'd like to share. Just a meditation on the beauty of a walk during October. I think I just published one of those. Things like that. Some My View topics have been done to death, Greg says. Life was simpler in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Yes, we still get those, I suppose. And then I really love garage sales or a tribute to one's late mom or dad. And I'm going to completely repudiate Greg's statement here. If you want to write about your mom or dad, please do so. I welcome that. I can't imagine why. So, but it's a personal essay. And so you can really express your personality. You can use a little slang. It gives you a little freedom. Like the same rules, not using italics, all caps, bold. I mean, it's not a big deal if you do, but we're going to take them out. So if you're really counting on them to make your point, you're not going to have them. Yeah, and the way what he says, but the My View is really it could be about a book you've read and how you related that to your life and how it maybe forced you to act on something. And we do get a lot of family stories, and we get stuff about food, which is really neat. And we get, it's the whole. A lot of it is just about the glories of living in Western New York and what a great place that we have here, and we do get sad ones that are about people who have passed and when the experience is immediate, and those are really hard to read and they're really hard to edit, but I think it's so important to get them in. And when we run those, I often get comments back. And it's really one of the most gratifying columns to run, is because they'll say, please, thank you so much for publishing it. This meant so much to me. My family was so thrilled. We're sharing this everywhere. So it's one of my favorite parts of the paper now. And it wasn't, when I was just a reader so as much, but now that I have this intimate relationship with it, I really like it a lot. Now, another voice, strictly limited, and it says 480 words, and that is not true. I can't run that at longer than 450. That excludes the bio and the byline, because the byline goes in like this all cap font that takes up a lot of space. And as soon as I put it in there, it jumps and
I think we've always said 460.
Yeah, 460 is okay. But here's the good thing. What I've been doing, and I don't really know if this is, I'm making it okay, is that when they're longer, I run the full length online. And online, it will have a lot of people include hyperlinks, and those hyperlinks will translate into the online version. So we'll have all those. So, and I've really been stretching this. I've run, because some of the Another Voices, they are political. They are about issues. They're about issues of safety, the community benefits agreement. I think there's maybe a couple lines that went over that you will find that are restored in the online version. They're often written by extremely knowledgeable people who are good writers, like Andrea here. And I don't even have, the beauty of them is that they barely take any editing. So what I try, my thing with Another Voice is to make sure that the person's points are being made in a clear manner. Now, sometimes with those, you will need to use acronyms, because often you are referring to groups, and that have strings of letters as their acronym, and then you have to say what it means. But then because of the word count limit, after you've said what it stands for, you're going to use that acronym just to save space. So we welcome them on all types of topics. We often we try to keep them local, but if we have, it was a wire story. It wasn't sent in from anyone in Western New York, but it was about children. I think it was about children's rights, and it was really good. And I ran it, and it was something that I felt would educate our readers and would make our readers think about a certain topic. And that's what really the Another Voices are for. Recently, we've had a lot of Another Voices on the demolition of the Great Northern Grain Elevator. We had a whole string of Another Voices after the horrible massacre on May 14th about racial injustice and issues of equity and things that really need to change in Buffalo. And we're still getting a lot of another voices about the injustice and inequities that exist in our community, and how, but more important, how can we fix them? Yes.
You have somebody that you have to report to, clear what you're thinking, these ideas that you get, you want to report to somebody.
We have a whole string of editors who read everything that goes into the paper. I don't have to report to them. They're going to read it anyways. I mean, it's not, it's like I'm at the, mid rung, I'm going to say, and that might be optimistic. No, we have an editorial page editor. He looks at it. And then there's a couple copy editors who look at it after. There's the online copy, the digital copy editor, and the print copy editor. And then we have managing editors who see the whole paper, and we have an editor-in-chief who sees the whole paper. There's a lot of people who are looking. It's not, I don't have untrammeled freedom to put anything I want in the paper, believe me.
So on any given day, you have, like, say, another voice, you might have a mic view.
We'll always have both. Yeah.
And actually, sorry to interrupt, but that was a question on Zoom, so I'd like you to just restate that whole thing so Zoom can hear. That every day there's.
Yes.
How often are these published daily or weekly?
My View and Another Voice are daily.
And then there's multiple letters to the editor every day. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And in addition, of course, you have like syndicated columns.
Right.
And they write this stuff. They pick that stuff up, whether it is right or good for us, along with everything else. The question is, well, in My View columns, there is one. How many My View columns do you get? And then you print one. I mean, you can't print, surely can't print all of them.
Well, I have a whole lineup of them, and I go through generally by date they were submitted. Just that's the easiest and fairest way to do it. Published, until, so the ones that just came in today, you're not going to see those in the paper for another couple weeks or 3 weeks, even depends on how many I get in. Usually it's really hard to say. I haven't, I don't think, no, not that many, but I generally have at least 10, at the very least, I will have 10 in hand, but usually a little bit more than that, but not an unwieldy amount, not an unmanageable amount. It tends to work out okay. And I also check, the exception is, are they writing about something that's timely? Like, and hopefully they say this in their email. They'll say, this is about Columbus Day. That helps me. Then I just don't put that, if it didn't say that, then I might have it sit there and run it in November. So, yeah.
But do they, will they send you an email? Well, here's a My View column that talks about this, that, and the other thing. And so I hope you find it interesting. And then what do they attach their article?
Yes, they attach their article. It can be a Word attachment, or they can, they can just include the whole thing in the email. Doesn't matter to me. Send a PDF. I don't care. I don't know why that was a problem. It's easy to copy and paste stuff out of a PDF. These people did not work at Spree, and they're just so, yeah, you get submissions and everything. A recent thing to do is share a Google Doc. Google Docs I've actually been using Google Docs for my writing recently, and I never thought I would, because it's not really a word processing program. But if you write on that, you can work on that wherever you are, as long as you can get to your Google account. So you're traveling, it's right there. Everything you wrote, it's right wherever you are, as long as you're at a computer and can get to your, it's in the cloud. So that's one way. But yes, they attach the text in whatever way. There are, I suppose, a few weird formats that I wouldn't be able to open. And then a picture of themselves. This is very important. A digital headshot should be a JPEG. And that really shouldn't be a PDF, should be a JPEG. And just one of these. the lowest resolution, the lowest file size this thing's going to take is like 1 megabyte, 2 megabytes, which is fine for us. But for some reason, I get a lot of headshots that are not big enough to use. It's a big problem. You can't use in print what you can put online. You can put tiny little things online. It's fine. It's the web. It's all right. For print, though, you've got to have higher resolution. Not as much as I need it at Spree, but still like a one. Compared to a picture that you took with a camera? Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose people still take pictures and get prints, but no, not a print, a picture that you can attach to an email. That's a digital image. And we do need that for every MyView, and it has to be a straight headshot, not a full length, not a horizontal, like with scenery in it. That doesn't help. Just you, no one else. Those are not needed for another voice. When we put another voice online, we do find little teaser images that we put with it, but we don't need them. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So. First of all, Cricky has been pulling up, which folks on Zoom have been seeing. We have a page on our website called Working with the Media, and this gives you a lot of the information we've talked about today. You can download sample letter to the editor, a sample op-ed, the another voice tips that we mentioned. These give the word counts, which we'll be updating after today as well. But to kind of go back to our just quick guidance on writing each of these submissions. A lot of these tips apply across the 3 types we've talked about. I want to make the point for our partners with our policy change focus that we often will say, my view is the personal story, as Elizabeth shared. You can have a personal story that makes a point about a public policy issue. So that's one that we actually don't see a lot of our partners using, but I think could be quite used. And then another voice, as you heard, is someone with qualifications. I'm curious how the paper kind of views who has kind of expertise in an area. How do you weigh, is this person someone with expertise?
Well, of course, the ED of Partnership for the Public Good is a good title to have. But teachers. Were you a social worker or any kind of, any sort of professional job, really? And if it's a really fabulous another voice, I'm going to stretch a point and use it, even if you don't have a title after your name. I mean, the important thing is what you say. And if you know what you're talking about and you make your points and you have your facts together, then I'm certainly not going to cavil because you're not the director of something. We do get, just so you know, and we don't, in terms of the type of opinion, doesn't have to agree with our editorial viewpoint, doesn't have to agree with any, I mean, it's, we get from, say, politicians have, say, congressmen, assemblymen, state senators, they have their PR people who write opinion pieces that presumably came from the pen of this politician, but really did not. But they do represent their views, and that can be considered another voice. So, but yeah, I mean, it's we're extremely wide-ranging, and we don't really have a hard and fast rule. We're going to reject something because we don't feel you have the credentials. That if it's a good piece, that simply is not going to happen.
Thank you. And that's a big part, I think, of our work and what we're emphasizing with our partners too is we're all experts on the issues that we live. We all have this local knowledge of what we experience. So it's great to hear all that. So we like to advise across all these pieces for our purposes of influencing the public policy conversation, you might want to end with a call to action, end with a clear call to action. Should that be taken by a public figure, readers of the letter? What are you looking for? And then, of course, the final piece, which we've started to talk about, is sending it in. We advise partners include your name, your email address, your phone number, because the paper may call to verify this if you're going to print it, maybe with the issue you experienced, Dawn, too, of is this person just copying and pasting? But we had an interesting question on Zoom from one of our folks, Emily Brady, who's a longtime immigration advocate and worked for a long time at the International Institute, asking, what about folks who, for immigration status reason, want to write into the paper, but are concerned about their identity? There's probably other issues where folks are concerned about giving their identity if they're saying, you know, I'm in the US, I've paid taxes here for 20 years, but I don't have an active visa. I don't know. Is there any way for those voices to get into the paper, or do you could verify their identity, but then protect their privacy? That's what she's wondering about.
I think that's really more of a letter to the editor.
It does sound like,
I've never
yeah.
had that. Okay. And probably anyone who's writing in another voice about those kinds of issues would speak for them. They would choose someone to speak for them. And I have in fact had that. I think someone wrote in on behalf of a prisoner and they used a different name, but the person who wrote had their name. Right. But for letters,
that's a tough one. That's a very different, I can't imagine a scenario where we would be able to use a letter to the editor and sign it anonymous or not use the person's name. That would be a very difficult one. And maybe that would also be a letter that was represented by the director of some organization.
yeah,
if the
those are
person,
reportability, transparency, accountability, all the kinds of things that newspapers hold dear.
Yeah.
And to have anonymous writing is just,
it's not like a reporter who can, maybe have an anonymous source, that has been vetted through their editor. They don't just throw it in there and have it published.
What about a pseudonym, or is somebody's the real name is either Ortiz? Why could it be like Peter Paul?
Okay, yeah. So pseudonyms are also not going to reach the threshold for letters. I have had people ask that question in the past, particularly when Donald Trump was president and they were criticizing him and they were concerned about other people kind of, but yeah, we've been through this and we cannot do that.
So there's some follow-up in our Zoom chat here. Jennifer Connor is on, who's Director of Justice for Migrant Families. And she says, actually, she has had undocumented workers that she works with who want to write in another voice about the Excluded Worker Fund, which is a state issue now. They are excluded workers, so they're experts on that, but they did not know if their information would be safe. So is there a way to do that? And maybe, Jennifer, we could follow up with this and think through mechanisms.
I know very well.
Yes, I know. I'm guessing, Jennifer, feel free to unmute here, but also I know, there's a lot of us who work in community coalitions, and sometimes we have an agreement like that of she works closely with these folks, she'll write on their behalf, but obviously sometimes they do want to write for themselves and speak for themselves as well.
Well, the article could be, let's say, by Jennifer, but could include extensive quotes from those people. I think that's fair enough. I think that's a fair enough compromise right there.
I think, that'd be a good one we can follow up on and see. I'm sure that's an issue that a lot of papers in cities with big immigrant populations have dealt with as well. So sending it in, friends, include your name, email address, the identity issues we just talked about. This is something that Dawn flagged for us right at the start that we always share. Think about where to submit, which audience do you want to reach. You can create different versions of your letters for different outlets or your columns, but as we heard, most will not run it if it's already appeared somewhere else. So submit one place at a time and really have that priority list of, this time I want to submit to the Challenger because I'm writing specifically on an issue that affects the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood and they have such a strong readership there. Or this time I want to speak to readers in a much broader geographic area. So let's go for the Buffalo News. So you can have that conversation about your important audiences as well. We have heard about letters to the editor, another voice, my view. I think we are so far into our workshop here that I don't want to take time to look at samples, but we do have samples on our website page that you can look at of these. And then feel free to come back to us and discuss those. But I'd love to see, are there any questions about these columns? And I'm going to bring the mic over to you. And then we will take time to talk about the very important issue of how to ask for meetings and influence the editorial board.
Hi. So I know that you said we shouldn't be trying to publish in multiple places at once. And I know that you also said sometimes you'll save things for down the line. What would be a good time frame to wait to try and get it published elsewhere if we don't think the Buffalo News is going to publish it? Or will you let us know we will publish this eventually? So just sit tight.
Well, often it's not your fault.
I've had people tell me they'll say, we're thinking of placing this somewhere else if you can't run it. So just be upfront. Tell us. It's like, we're looking at such and such. And then I'll say, okay, we would like to run this, you know, or I'll say, go ahead, place it. That's good luck with that, or, you know, placing it someplace else. And I have had people pull things at the last minute saying that I just got this accepted at Newsweek. It was in my view too. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm like, good for you. You know?
And then I think it's great to have you two here because we shared, you know, the email addresses. You send letters to the editor, to letter-to-editor@buffnews.com. You send the other two columns to edit page at buffnews.com. And when you send that into those addresses, I think sometimes it can feel strange to add that kind of information of, if you can't print this in the next 2 weeks, I'd like to send it to the Challenger, or our group has a press conference coming up next week. So are you able to print it in that time frame? Because it feels like it's going to the big machine of the Buffalo News. But now we know it's going to you two lovely folks, and it's okay to include that type of information of, I really would like to know, can this be in the next 10 days or not?
It's really helpful to the whole time frame thing. Like if someone says, I'm sending this on behalf of Senator, so whatever, and it doesn't say like what it's about, it could be something that is extremely timely that I'll want to run sooner rather than later. So, and all the information that you can include in the email is totally fine.
Great. Other questions on the 3 types of opinion submissions?
I was just thinking about like people writing on behalf of their organization versus people writing on behalf of themselves for the another voice, and just if there's any sort of preference, or do people, do you know what I'm saying? Like if you work in an organization, how do you sort of decide if it's just you or if it's representing your whole organization?
It depends on what you're writing. If it's appropriate for it to be, it's better, you know, if it does represent your opinions, it is more personal, then yeah, just have you, that's fine. And like I said, we're just looking at how well the piece addresses an issue. Obviously it's not a personal essay, keeping that. And so you don't want to make it too personal, but if it's about an issue, and sometimes the issue-oriented and other voices have included personal information about a loss that someone suffered, and this, you know, and related it to a larger issue, and that's totally fine.
Anybody else? Great. Well, thank you so much for that. If we have time, if folks want to stay at the end, we can look at a couple samples that we have on our website. But I'd love to move to a tool that I think maybe you don't feel this way, but we feel is underused. I don't know how many more editorial board meetings you want scheduled into your life, but folks can request an editorial board meeting, which means going into the news building. Used to be in person. Maybe you're doing it on Zoom now, but in person. Okay. Going into the editorial board. And as most of you know, the editorial board writes the editorials in the paper, which is the paper taking an official position on public issues. So in today's paper, I believe it was today, said, you know, don't blame bail reform. You've written before, I think, to say don't have bail reform be, I don't know if it's you two, I'm saying the board. Yes, don't lean into bail reform as political scapegoat. Today it said, you know, there have been a couple tragic incidents. These incidents always happen. This should not be tied directly to bail reform. We see the data tells us that it's not, right? So you can sometimes, I'm sure, and you can tell us more, the editorial board is following current issues and writes these things themselves. Other times we have groups of our partners that will go in and say, we would like the editorial board, for example, to endorse our position that the Outer Harbor should be a state park. It should be preserved as a state park and transferred to state parks management for all these good reasons. We go in, that we present that. The editorial board writers ask us a bunch of questions. We're prepared to answer those. And the hopeful outcome is that the Buffalo News will say the Outer Harbor is a beautiful gem of Buffalo's waterfront and should be protected forever as a state park, right? So basically, we have a really simple information on our website about you email Dawn here to get those meetings. And when you go, you want to be explaining who you are, what your issue is, why it matters. But I'd love to just hear, your overview of how those meetings work. Things like how should partners be prepared? How many people do you like to have come in, or how many is too many to come in on an issue?
Okay, my colleague Elizabeth just made a great point about sometimes these editorial board meetings, since reporters usually, not always, but usually do sit in on the meetings. They can, yes, not always, reporters, yes, that those meetings can lead to stories, or there may be an article that they're working on, and it's helpful for them to be in the meeting. The meetings are always on the record.
Right. I'm just, for example, if the superintendent of BPS comes in, our education reporter is probably going to be there, and so there might be a story, not just an editorial, there might be both, there might be one or the other. So it leads to different types.
And also there have been instances where a group may come in and the editor will say, well, we may not write on this topic, but you're perfectly welcome to submit another voice, with your stance on whatever position. For the most part, we do try to listen to both sides. We might have a pro coming in on one issue and then the con coming in on the very same issue. We have had in-person meetings for about a year or so. Sometimes in certain instances lately, because we're in a new world, they might be virtual, for expediency. If a group says, I need to meet with you right away, we can't get everyone together because disparate schedules and things like this is easier to do. We've been a bit more open with that. We do prefer, though, the in-person, and I think the person who wants to have the meeting would also prefer in-person. It's a different experience if you want to get your point across. Oh, yeah. So in terms of asking for a meeting, I think you did share my email, right? So email me. Did you share my phone number?
I think we just have your email on our website.
So my phone number is 716-849-4188. So that's 716-849-4188. And so what I would do is I would have the discussion with our editorial editor, Kevin Walter, and say, this person represents this group. They would like to come in for a meeting. And, we're very open, to meetings. We've had people who have disagreed with us strongly. In my 22 years, believe me, there have been some interesting meetings, and on different topics. And we have, just all sorts of folks.
So who sets the agenda for those meetings?
The meetings go 30 minutes, and the person who is requesting the meeting basically sets the agenda. They tell us why they're there. Kevin will start off and say, why are you here?
How long of an opening kind of pitch?
If you have 30 minutes, my best advice is to use that sparingly. Also, my advice is don't bring more than 4 people. Since I've been at the Buffalo News, if you bring in more than 4 people, it'll trigger the higher ups. They'll see them coming, walking in, and they'll say, how many people? They start muttering, how many people are coming in? Because everyone wants to talk, and you're going to chew up those 30 minutes,
And so just to clarify, by not using too much time in your opening pitch, what are you leaving time for? Back and forth with the editorial board writers so they can learn more and really decide if they want to take it on.
I find that is critical, because if I've had experiences where we've met with people, We've had 30 minutes. We've been on, all of us have on wallpaper in our minds, all the stuff we have to do back in that office. And we might have questions, but we're afraid to ask them because it might be a 5 or 10 minute answer. And we're already at the end of the meeting, allotted time. So if you can capsulate, if you can bring in, maybe you want to bring in material to share ahead of the meeting, that we can at least browse, that could help.
How often does the group coming in lead to an editorial? You know what I mean? I'm just curious about that.
Well, we do political endorsement interviews, and those always lead to an endorsement of one person or another. Ordinarily, though, not always. Sometimes it's just informational, and it's something that we'll pick up. And like I said, it could be something that really needs to be reported first. We might need more information. A really good example is recently Preservation Buffalo Niagara came in. Jesse Fisher came in with a consultant, and I'm sorry, I just can't pull his name out. But with a new report on the actual dollars and cents economic value of preservation. And was really interesting. It was new information. It went along with things we'd already been writing about, like preserving Great Northern and also the deteriorating buildings on South Park. So we did write an editorial that mainly focused on it, and we reported on it as well. And that was accompanied by a PDF that was mailed to all of us. It was long, but it was also very clear and had, point by point. And that was kind of the perfect sort of, I think, pitch and meeting.
And speaking of that PDF, I remember a letter came in related to that. So that was my opportunity to go in and grab the PDF and hypertext link it in that letter. So I was thrilled about that.
So the two of you sit in with the editorial board to take in information?
They're part of the board.
Part of it. The editorial board is
Kevin Walter, the editorial board editor, the two of us, the editor or the executive editor of the Buffalo News, and the publisher. So, and the publisher comes a lot.
Well, the publisher,
Tom Wiley. And the executive editor is Sheila Rayam.
but they're local?
They're all local, yes.
And just another question.
So it's just 5 people.
Self-esteem. So these individuals, they see themselves as qualified and credible with regard to various issues that meet the public. And I mean, there could be another newspaper comes along and says, well, we have our editorial experts and we think this and that.
I mean, you can answer that for yourselves, but I wanted to say, obviously these writers have moved up through the ranks of journalism, all their previous jobs, up through the papers, just like you have, I'm sure, in the Jungian world, just like I have in the public policy world, right? We are all in our jobs making decisions about what programming to feature, what speakers to select, what issues to select. And I see the paper as the same, but you can weigh in on that if you want to, on your own behalf.
Yeah, I mean, we look at Dawn here. How long has your career in journalism been? 35 years. Yeah, that's not nothing. And our publisher has worked all over the country, various publications, editor mainly throughout New York State, Sheila. Our editorial editor, Kevin, has worked Texas, Canada, Binghamton, so it's not just it's experience and diverse experience and a lot of exposure to a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different issues, and most of it sticks up here.
Does that answer?
Okay. And so to kind of recap the editorial board meeting, also it's important because for those of us trying to influence public positions, elected officials pay a lot of attention to the paper's official position. And I would say they pay a lot more attention to that than my little another voice column, right? So getting in the paper is wonderful and has an influence, but getting the paper to take a position probably casts a wider influence, and is probably certainly much more embarrassing for elected officials if the paper takes a position, or much more encouraging if the paper takes a position against them or with them. If Tanvier, no offense, my friend Tanvier, writes in, that's probably less embarrassing or encouraging to them than if the whole paper itself does it. So it's really worth doing. And as you've heard, the door is open. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Good. Good. And we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. That's great. Thank you so much. So to recap.
I know, I miss being there. No, that was a spree thing.
Yeah. So to recap, they're 30-minute meetings. Don't bring more than 4 people. So if you're in a policy coalition, you really want to think of, what do each of your speakers represent on that issue? You don't want to bring 4 data nerds. You want to have 1 data nerd and then someone who's affected by the issue, someone taking another angle, someone who's able to tell a personal story. Keep your pitch brief, as we heard, to really have time for that discussion, to make sure the board can get all the information they would need to investigate or take a position. And then, we have had that interesting experience where actually an editorial board meeting leads to more coverage in the main news part of the paper, and then looking at the issue first before possibly eventually leading to an editorial. So any questions on editorial boards? I want to just address, John, and what happened one more time is that really we're here because our partners want to learn certain skills. In fact, we're funded to host these as skills building workshops, and we would not pause to dig deep into any side of one particular issue. When we have a workshop on understanding climate and environmental degradation, that's where we would have a debate on that issue, but not in a skills workshop where partners have taken their time, often out of their nonprofit salaried funded days, to come and learn skills. So that's why that happened. And I want to take any other questions specific to the skills we're here to learn today.
I would say but this actually illuminates a little bit when we talk about public positions or faces or forces in the public debate.
I mean, the public debate has a lot to do with obviously public policy and politics. And it would seem then that those who are in, say, government or in politics or policymakers, they're going to be paying attention to the public to the extent that they have to, I would assume. So this is where journalism and the whole newspaper concept and the public eliciting public commentary and things like this. And then, of course, the newspaper comes over the top with their editorial positions. This is a force within the social body, wouldn't you say? Or not?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do get a lot of feedback from the folks in Albany, from the politicians, and they really pay attention, to our editorials, in Albany. And we're very grateful to still have that influence, especially in our industry. We're strong here in Western New York. A lot of things to be proud of in our paper. The Buffalo News, there are communities who envy, us because of what we still have here. And everyone is a part of that. So.
Yeah. And for our advocacy purposes, you can also really make the most of getting one of these pieces in to that point as well. If you are a constituent, if you live in the district of an elected official that you want to take action on the issue you got published on, can send that directly to their team. I'm sure you get a lot of that in Crystal Peoples-Stokes' office. You can post it on social media for your organization, for yourself. So also, if you are able to get one of these pieces published or influence the editorial board, make sure you really make the most of that in the media that you have so much control over now, all of the media that we can take advantage of ourselves. Thanks to all of our partners. We're gathering again next week, and this shows how it's very much skills-based for a session on how to prepare and excel for TV and radio interviews, because we very much find that's one of the most stressful parts of our work with the media, to have that camera pointed at you or to be on air. We're going to have a couple of broadcast journalists here to practice with us, and we are actually going to have an experiment where those who want to can practice doing a little informal interview on camera, and then we'll give tips and work through that. So kind of hands-on practice of broadcast journalism interviews. It is very intense. Okay. Thank you so much, John. And thank you all for joining us today.